Wondering what went wrong in a relationship or struggling to keep one afloat? Well, today I've got 5 things that will wreck a relationship for sure. Stay tuned. Most people don't start a relationship wondering, how could I wreck this? But today I'm going to give you 5 things you can do that are sure to ruin a relationship, particularly a romantic one, but not necessarily. Number one, if you want to derail a relationship, if you want to keep it from really being healthy or blossoming, the first thing that you can do is miss bids for connection. Now, what do I mean by that? A bid for connection can happen in very subtle ways or very direct ways. So, a direct example of a bid for connection would be like, hey, honey, you want to come sit down and enjoy a cup of coffee with me? But often bids for connection come in more indirect ways, like, honey, come look at this thing out the window, or wow, did you see that? And all the while, if you miss the bid for connection, what you need to do is just not respond to those things. So when they say, hey, come sit down on the couch and have a cup of coffee with me, or, did you see that? All you have to do is stare at your phone and not look up, or continue reading what you're reading, typing on your computer, staring out the window in your own direction, and just not really acknowledge that they're trying to make a bid for connection. Missed bids for connection are highly correlated with poor relational success, not just in romantic relationships, but across the board. When we study healthy marriages, we find that people make those bids for connection. They respond to bids for connection more than 80% of the time. In the worst relationships that are just kind of doomed, unfortunately, barring a miracle of God, those people only hit those bids for connection or respond to bids for connection around 30% of the time. The second thing that you can do if you want to derail a good relationship or make it not so good is to refuse influence. What is that? Well, both this and the concept I talked about before come out of John and Julie Gottman's research on what makes healthy couples healthy, what helps them thrive. Accepting influence refers to one's ability to understand, to take in, to respond to the thoughts, feelings, and values of the other person. It doesn't mean that you always go along with them or that you agree with everything they say. What it does mean is you allow their thoughts, their feelings, and their values to inform the way that you behave and the way that you respond. You take those things into consideration. One of the biggest predictors for marital success is a husband who will accept his wife's influence. Why is that a bigger predictor than a woman? Well, because women tend to do this more naturally. Now, I know I might get some pushback, but this is just what the science says. Women are just naturally more relational as a general rule. I know that's not true of all women, but as a general rule. And so they are much more likely in their nature to respond to their partner's feelings or values or thoughts. For men, when they don't accept influence, their female partner or the other person with whom they're in any kind of a relationship with feels shut out, dismissed, ignored, unimportant. And over time, that leads to a whole host of other problems. That brings me to number 3. What is the third thing that you can do to derail your relationship? Refuse to hold conversations, especially critical or important conversations. So you can do this by just avoiding conversations altogether, or during a conversation, just choose silence. Don't respond. This will ruin your relationship fairly surely. Now, there are a couple other strategies that are part of the refusal to hold good dialogue or to have a crucial conversation. One of those things is to shut down a conversation either through defensiveness or blame. It's not my fault that happened. I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't have done that. Or, well, I can't help it. This is just the way I am. Get defensive, blame. That will help shut down the conversation. And if that doesn't work, here's something else you can do if you really want to ruin your relationship as part of that avoiding conversation, and that is stonewalling. Stonewalling is refusing to have the conversation at all. I can't talk about this right now. Okay, well, when can you talk about it? I don't know. I just can't talk about it. And then never giving them a time when you will re-engage in the conversation. Just making sure that the conversation itself is a non-starter. That's why it's called stonewalling. You're putting up a wall between you and that other important person. Great way to ruin a relationship. All right, number 4. You want to ruin a relationship? Be critical. Find fault in everything. Forget to be grateful. Forget to find the silver lining and just criticize. That brings me to number 5. My fifth tip for you today, if you want to ruin your relationship, is refuse to forgive, harbor resentment, and let it turn into contempt. Now, contempt is a tricky thing. Contempt is in the brain, it is kind of a combination between anger and resentment and disgust. It actually uses both parts of the brain, the part associated with disgust and the part associated with anger. So it's this really convoluted thing. And here's something else. This is also based on John and Julie Gottman's 40 years or so of research working with couples. When we talk about things that can really erode a relationship, they talk about the four horsemen. Those four horsemen are defensiveness, criticism, stonewalling, and contempt. Of those four horsemen, the number one predictor of a marriage that won't make it is contempt. Because in my own experience of working with couples for almost 30 years, once they get to that place, it is so hard to walk them back. It's like a couple becomes neurally hardwired to just be repulsed by their partner by the time they get to that contempt, which comes from the root of bitterness, which comes from a refusal to forgive. All right. I paired these 5 steps in a kind of a satirical way. I don't think any of you are trying to ruin your relationship. Maybe some of these hit you kind of hard because you were like, oh, I've been on the receiving end of that. It doesn't feel good. Or, oh, maybe I've done that to my partner. Remember, there is always hope and healing in the love of Jesus. I hope that you can take these 5 tips and make some decisions about how you want to show up in your relationships. If this has been helpful to you, remember to like and subscribe. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.